Welcome to Military Faith and Spiritual Resilience. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. With me today is Alexandra Siliezar, sister to former U.S. Marine Abraham Siliezar. Thank you for coming back again.
It's an honor to be here, Elizabeth.
Really appreciate you sharing your family's story, especially as connected with your brother Abraham. When we finished in the last segment, Abraham was in the hospital. He was unconscious. When you had first seen him, he had been transferred then to the VA brain trauma unit. It had been quite an extensive treatment already, trying to help him recover from a brain injury sustained on top of PTSD, but a brain injury sustained by a transient as your brother came out of a store in San Francisco and the transient hit him. So how did your brother's recovery proceed?
I could take this so many different ways, Elizabeth. Let me just tell you. Okay. He was a free man. By that I mean he could not wait to get out of the hospital. He just needed to get out. And I think part of the trauma of the brain injury, he would say that nothing had happened to him, that he was fine, that he could do the things he thought and would try to do, and would say, no, you can't do that. As he started gaining more strength, I would walk him out on weekends into the neighborhood. Now, I would have to almost, people are afraid of what they don't know and they don't understand. And being a person of color, being an immigrant, people are wondering, what are you doing in my store? Especially when you look different. And I had to always explain to people, my brother has a brain injury. And then they would leave us alone. They would have some compassion. And that made me angry. Why should I have to give excuses of why my brother looks and acts different than what they would expect? Would they have more compassion if we were Caucasian? Would they be more understanding? Or do they think we're here to rob them? And I hate it to this day, having to carry that while caring for him. And those are the realities of most immigrants. Not everyone, but a lot of people of color, especially men. So I saw a lot of eyebrows being raised in a very affluent community in Palo Alto. But nonetheless, my brother wanted to be strong enough to get out of the hospital, even though he wasn't. And I could see that he was not going to make it on his own. He couldn't tie his shoelaces. He couldn't go to the ATM machine. Just simple things that we all need to survive on a day-to-day basis. I couldn't see that happening for him. And I advocated for him to be conserved. Now, I know that I was not asking to lock him up and, close the door on him, but I wanted to have the ability to speak on his behalf when I knew he couldn't understand. When he did not understand how grave he was or the situation was, that I could speak up to the powers that be on his behalf.
So you wanted the legal right. You're looking for the legal right to advocate for him versus just walking with him.
Exactly.
So how did that go?
That was a challenge. When he was already in Palo Alto, that was denied. And I understand because, being in the job that I'm in, I understand that it takes sometimes multiple times of trying and proving. So he was discharged. And I was really worried for, what he could or could not do. And so the first week I took him into my house, and he was not able to control a lot of things. I took him to Yosemite for a weekend with my dad and my daughter, and I just thought, okay, let's just do something, fun and relaxing. And that was the first time I noticed that he would vomit uncontrollably, and I did not know what that was about. The first time I didn't think too much of it. I thought maybe that's strange, but okay, people do vomit. But that was a problem that continued and only got worse in the next 5 years.
Was it just randomly at random times? It was just start?
Following food or drinking water. But it progressed to that, it progressed to that. But before, we did eventually take another trip with our church. We had a little spiritual retreat once in Mendocino, and that weekend is when I really noticed daily vomiting. And again, I was still not, it didn't click right away. And the doctors knew, but they weren't doing anything about it. So I thought, well, as long as they know, maybe they'll tell me when we need to act. I thought they were the experts and they would tell me, but they never did. And
what did they attribute it to anything?
I do know now that a lot of traumatic brain injury people suffering with TBIs have had this as a symptom, and I think it was attributed to something related to the TBI.
Vomiting every day can't be good.
It was awful.
So how does that affect health and digest? I mean, you're not digesting then, right?
It was awful.
How do you get nutrition?
He wasn't. He looked completely different. He was completely thin. He was afraid of eating, even though sometimes he had appetite or maybe hunger.
Sure.
He would avoid food. Or if he ate, you would hear him vomiting.
So how was his cognition? How cognizant was he of everything going on with his body and in his life? Because you said he couldn't handle a lot of things. So where was his cognition?
When he was released from the Palo Alto VA TBI unit, one of the doctors told me that he could possibly begin to suffer seizures. And about a year later, after being discharged, he had his first seizure that at least I witnessed. I didn't know what was going on, and so not knowing the first seizure, what was going on, he fell to the ground and hurt his head on one of my tables. Oh. That proceeded to multiple countless of seizures in the next 4 years. And ambulance picking him up and him bleeding and having needing stitches and
bleeding on his body,
on his
from
forehead. He would
forehead.
always hit his head first.
Okay.
And so his head, on top of all the TBI, the original TBI, had subsequent injury and falling downstairs and going to the hospital and him saying, no, I'm okay, and I'm fine, even though he was bleeding. And, one time the doctor said, you need stitches. And he said, no, I'm okay. And so the doctor said, okay, I won't do stitches, but we'll have to just put tape. And they put tape on him instead. And me not having that legal right to say, no, we're going to go do the stitches, and not having the ability to say, and he loved to see me. He would listen to almost anything I said. So I would say, no, honey, here's, he would, I remember one of his sweet faces, he was bleeding. He had fallen from the stairs of one floor to the next floor in a building. And they had called me to say, your brother has fallen. And he was in the hospital, and I rushed to see him in the ER. And they said, oh, there's a nurse outside of the bathroom. And I came, and he wasn't on his bed, and he was in the bathroom. And then we hear two big falls in the bathroom. And then he comes out of the bathroom bleeding even more, and it's like, okay, he had more seizures in the bathroom. He was seizing the whole time. And even though he had blood dripping down through his face, when he saw me, he just gave me the biggest, sweetest smile. And he said, sister, and I was like, Abraham, and so He was so brave. He never complained, and he literally said, "I will not complain," and I'll tell you more about that later.
Okay. So you're still struggling to get the conservatorship set up, right? With a lot of frustration.
Yes.
A lot of frustration. And you're also facing prejudice.
Yes.
When you're out with him.
Yes.
Because people don't understand.
Yes.
What were your next steps?
Working in healthcare, I have seen firsthand, I hate to admit it, but it's true, who gets more attention versus others, or how people are labeled, or, with character problems versus, something else. He was admitted into multiple different hospitals in San Francisco, from San Francisco General to St. Francis, the VA, and it was different experience at every hospital. And at San Francisco General, or Zuckerberg Hospital, they kept saying he needs to be conserved. And I would say, you're absolutely speaking my language. Yes, I agree. He was hospitalized more times than I can count. And each time, as soon as he regained any type of strength, he always wanted to get out. And the laws in this country are, they have the right to make those decisions. But when a person doesn't understand what the outcome would be if they get out, that it could cause death, and for him to say, no, I'm fine, something is not right. And I never had the ability to really convince the doctors of what was happening for him on the outside.
What were the reasons he was being admitted? Is it always a seizure that took him into the hospital? What would bring him to the hospital?
Usually, yes, a seizure. He had fallen. There was one incident where he had a seizure without me being there. He had broken his hand, and I took him to the hospital. He kept saying, "Sister, my hand hurts," and I don't know why, And I saw his hand. It was extremely swollen. I took him to the ER. He also had a rash on the back of his, on his back. And they just said, they told me to go to Walgreens or to the pharmacy and just get, a rash cream. And they never did x-rays for his hand. And so later that week, I took a picture, both of his hand next to mine, and I sent it to the social worker, and I said, this is not right. His hand is hurt. The social worker was able to take him to the doctors. They realized, yes, he has a broken hand. And it had been some time already. It was not, at least a couple of weeks. And they just gave him something to wear that he could take on and off. Well, something that someone can take on and off takes a bit of understanding, both ability to do it and understanding that you need it. My brother didn't understand he needed it, so he took it off. And it was some type of brace or, cast that he could put on and off. And he didn't put it back on. And he would still say, "Sister, my hand really hurts." And I would say, "Abraham, your hand is broken." "No, it's not." "Abraham, your hand is broken." "No, it's not, but my hand hurts." And that went on for a long time, for over a year. And his hand was never able to recover, and he was never really able to open his fingers correctly. And it was his right hand, and he was right-handed. And he was never able to understand my hand was broken. So it was too late to repair it. And he suffered with that ongoing pain in that, broken right hand.
So talk a little bit more about it, where you saw as potential risk when he would try to leave the hospital early for other things.
Yes, he whenever he was in the hospital, and it was a struggle. I think the hospital at the VA was tired of seeing him in and out, and especially because he would struggle to try to get out, and so they didn't want to deal with it. They just, they had other patients. There was an incident that was violent, actually. He was in the transitional ICU, or between, urgent care and ICU. And I came into the hospital in the evening after work, and there was my little petite, thin brother trying to get out of the hospital with his pajama hospital gown and a little plastic bag of his clothing, and him just trying to get out, saying, "Give me the exit. Where's the exit?" And the security guards were very, very angry and telling him to get on the bed or they would force him and throw him on the ground. I was angry and shocked, in disbelief. These are not just considered security guards, they're called military police. And so somehow there's a lot of power that comes with that, and a lot of entitlement that comes with that. And trying to be someone to bring the tension down. I try to make light conversation with the officer and try to bring things down. And he wasn't having it. And he was yelling at my brother and saying, "We keep coming here for you, and you're going to listen or we're going to throw you down to the ground." And it was awful.
But he doesn't understand.
And he does not understand.
Did they not comprehend that
No.
that his comprehension was not there?
They never did. They never did. So I told the doctor, and I said, "Doctor, I can't believe this. I'm hearing this,
Yeah.
I can't believe there was like no intervention."
Yeah.
So somehow things seemed a little bit calmer after 30 minutes or so, this horrible incident. And I left. I had to have a daughter, and I had to go take care of her, so I left. The next morning, I don't know why, but now suddenly my brother was in ICU. Now, what happened after I left, I don't know.
He was in there for a seizure, right? And now he's
Trying to
there
leave.
trying to leave. And now he's in ICU.
Now he's in ICU.
What were his symptoms, or did they tell you?
I think they said that he had elevated heart rate, and all I can think of, there must have been an altercation with the security. There must have been something. Often when he was in the hospital for days, if not up to a couple of weeks, he was in 4-point restraints.
Oh, he was.
All the time.
Because he was trying to escape.
Both between being overly sedated. I once had a nurse call me and say that she herself had made a complaint that he was just way too sedated. They would give him in the 200s of milligrams of Ativan.
What were they worried about? Just the escape? Or were they worried about
Yeah.
something else? Just
Yeah.
him leaving? What would happen if he left to his health? In other words, if he were to leave the hospital early?
Well, he was really at risk of falling, and he was very weak. So once he was in the hospital and they would try to subdue him enough just to make him stay, he would, now they would have to go through the withdrawals of both the medications, and also now give him PT for giving him more strength, because now he had been laying down for a couple of weeks on the bed. So he had to go through PT and just more of stabilizing. But I honestly I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, but I do believe he was overly medicated each time he was at the VA, because I did not see that same transition happen when he was at different hospitals. There were much different action plans at other hospitals.
That's interesting. Can we pause and continue in the next segment?
Yes.
Thank you.